What's going on, y'all? We here, Safe Harlem now with Angel Ayon, founder of Ayon Studios. So let's get straight into it. What made you want to partner up with Safe Harlem now and get involved with the preservation movement?
Well, as a preservationist and as a person who lived in Harlem for a long time and was very involved with preservation advocacy in Harlem, it became very clear at a certain point that none of what is needed to save Harlem to make sure that Harlem as we know it endures and it's there for your kid, your grandkid, and mine's could be done at a personal level. So it was very clear to me at a certain point that the need for an organization that can really do the advocacy, do the work, not at an individual level, but at a collective level, it was paramount. And when the opportunity came up and I was asked to serve, I was delighted to be part of that effort, and I've been there with many others since the very beginning.
Sounds good. What areas of your work do you find the most fulfilling with Safe Harlem now?
Oh, we do a lot of work in Harlem and citywide, but our work in Harlem is often concentrated on churches,
Right.
cultural institutions, uh, and often brownstone.
Yeah.
So there you go. You have the quintessential definition of what makes a neighborhood special. And many other things. It's just the presence of very significant cultural institutions, relevant cultural institutions, which quite often are uh, houses of worship, which most of the time are really significant buildings,
Yeah.
both
Very true.
architecturally and also historically and so on. And they're often in very poor condition, so they do need the benefit of our assessment, our care, our expertise in guiding these many various institutions into the future.
Very true. What would you like the Harlem community to know about the importance of preservation?
What we do, it's not it's not just about buildings. It's not about details and beauty or freezing all this in time so that it's about it's about first making sure that there is an understanding that we had the fortune, the privilege of inheriting all this from our elders, from people who were here before us, and that we have the responsibility to care for it. Because if we don't care for it, it's going to be gone. But
Very
it's going to
true.
be transformed to an extent that it's going to be almost unrecognizable. So preservation is about first assigning value, having people understand why is it important, to whom is important, what happened here, and then also make sure that it's there for the future. So a lot of what people sometimes misunderstand about preservation is that we have an interest on just freezing things in time, and it had nothing to do with that. It's about really using those buildings as a way, as a vessel to ensure that there's a historical presence that has been here in the neighborhood for a long time. That is it's recognized, it's validated, and that is preserved for future generations. And that's what preservation is about. It's about preserving culture as it also not only in terms of its many intangible ways, but it's also as it's manifested in these physical entities, buildings, churches, streets, and everything that human beings have really done around it for centuries.
Yes. Amazing answer. So on that note, to close out, the final question I would have to ask you would be: there seems to be a disconnect between Harlem residents and what exactly preservationists such as yourself and Safe Harlem now are all about. So, what would you say to the average Harlem resident that wants to get involved within the preservation movement of our architectural heritage, but doesn't know exactly where to start? What advice would you give them?
Look, you don't have to go to school to get into that. That's
Right.
how I got to it. So that's one way to do it. But you don't need to get all the Ivy League titles to do that. That's not what this is about. That education helps, to frame the conversation, to be able to have certain conversations and discussions with entities and people in a position of power who speak that language.
Yeah.
But in reality, all these people of power and all these institutions, what eventually they need to do and care about, or at least must care about, is what folks on the street say, think, and believe. So it doesn't really matter if you're not a professionally trained preservationist, that's how I make a living, but that's not necessarily the only way to get involved in preservation advocacy and preservation issues. Nothing has more power than I live here, therefore I care.
Mm,
Nothing has more
that's
power
very true.
than I worship here. My parents worship here, and therefore I care about that block, that building. I went there as a child. My mom, my grandpa took me there as a young person, and therefore I have those memories. So those are that's exactly what this is about. It's about how people relate to the neighborhood, to all these cultural assets that we have under our care, and to convey those very personal opinions and to share all those personal experiences that are really what validate the effort that we're undergoing. You don't need to have any training. You don't need to have all the scholarship. All that stuff is it's really secondary because it's only about how do you understand what others have in mind about what this is about, or the protocols and the know-how and so on. How do you have informed conversations with the agencies that have power and authority, and how do you mediate with the community? But that's what we do because we have that skill. But that's not really the only way to be involved. There's nothing more simple and relevant than simply saying I care. This is important to me. If this place is important to my family, this place is has been the place where I came from and where my family came from, where we live, where we want our kids to live in the future. And I care about it because it has a meaning. And that's all you need to be part of this effort.
That's
That's
very
it.
true. Very articulate answer. So, in other words, in layman's terms, if you want to make a difference, come volunteer at Safe Harlem now.
There
That's
you
that's
go.
that's what he's really saying. So, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Save Harlem now.
All right, let's do it.